Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to the 2017 September 11th Community Ceremony of the Town of Mamaroneck, Village of Larchmont, and Village of Mamaroneck. I'm Nancy Seligson, and I'm the Town Supervisor for the Town of Mamaroneck. Every year, we come together to honor the victims of our community of September 11th, 2001, to share our sympathy with their families, to admire how we as a community, a state, a nation, and even a world came together to support New York and to thank our first responders. We lost 11 members of our community that fateful day, but many more were and continue to be affected by that loss. Last week I was talking to a friend who lost her husband in 9/11, and she happened to be having a bad day. I said I was sorry for her current troubles, and she responded with tears in her eyes that every day is a bad day. But our municipalities did come together that day and in the ensuing weeks to share our grief, comfort one another, and forge a bond of community. Sympathies from across the country and the world flowed into New York, and it seemed as there was a collective agreement against such horror. We took great pride in the response of our emergency service providers and praised our fire, police, and ambulance departments. We marveled at their bravery and courage and how hard they worked. We also realized just how vulnerable they are and what they sacrifice for others. I want to thank the fire departments, police departments, and ambulance districts of the Town of Mamaroneck, Village of Mamaroneck, and Village of Larchmont for attending this ceremony today and for serving our communities every day. The Girl Scouts of Larchmont Mamaroneck and the Boy Scouts of America are here to help us commemorate the day as well. And we also have members of VFW Post 1156, whose commander is Bert Corwin, American Legion Post 90, Commander Ed Goodenough, and American Legion Post 347, Commander Al Bender. Thank you guys for being here. I want to acknowledge the other elected municipal officials here today. From the town, we have Deputy Supervisor Jane Elkind-Eney and Councilman Tom Murphy. And Abby Katz, Councilwoman, said she's going to be a little late. From the Village of Larchmont, we have Mayor Lorraine Walsh, Trustees Malcolm Froman, Bubba Finelli, and Carol Casaza Herman. And from the Village of Mamaroneck, we have Trustees Leon Potok and Victor Tafour, and we're expecting Deputy Mayor Lou Santoro. There you are. Great, Lou. Thank you. So special thanks to the Girl Scouts also for creating this memorial spot and creating this ceremony in 2002. I invite the color guard from American Legion Post 90 and Post 347 for a color guard.
Color guard, forward, hunt. Hold. Face.
I invite the Boy Scouts to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Two. Color guard, right face. Forward.
Thank you. I invite Rabbi Jeff Serkman to give an invocation.
The immensity of loss still boggles the mind. One fateful day, thousands gone, and our world turned upside down by terror. They flew planes into buildings or crash landed them on the ground, but make no mistake, hate was their ultimate weapon. Back on almost the same day, in 1963, 4 little black girls attending Sunday school were killed in the Birmingham Baptist Church bombing. Hate was the weapon. The Reverend Dr. King delivered the funeral sermon. He was speaking to us today. These children, God's children, unoffending, innocent, were victims of one of the most vicious, heinous crimes ever perpetrated against humanity. These lives lost are heroines of a holy crusade for freedom and human dignity. So they have something to say to us in their deaths. They say to each of us that we must substitute courage for caution. They say that in spite of the darkness we face, we must not despair, nor must we harbor the desire to retaliate with violence. Their deaths say to us that we must work passionately and unrelentingly to make the American dream a reality. 16 years ago, our comfort zone was shattered, our complacency as a homeland safe from all harm crushed, but the dream was not destroyed. It is our task to transcend terror by aspiring toward a brighter vision for our world. So let the memories of all those taken on 9/11 become a testament to the dream we still share, a republic of righteousness that conquers hate with love, a people bound by common cause, liberty and justice for all. So through our hearts and hands, may it be. Amen.
Thank you, Jeff. We're going to change the order up a little bit for speakers because Senator Latimer and Legislator Parker have to run off to other events in other communities, so I'd like to invite Senator George Latimer to speak first.
Well, maybe a little bit of a frustration for Catherine and I to rush off to Rice City because of the sequence of events. It's encouraging to know that every community is doing this, taking the time to honor our first responders, honor the memory of the people we lost that day. I shared a post on Facebook earlier today, and I'm going to read it as quickly as I can. I was at the cemetery not long ago, Holy Sepulchre Cemetery in New Rochelle, where my mother is buried. It was at the 20th remembrance anniversary of her passing. And I went to the gravesite, which is where my grandparents are buried, and I remembered my mom taking myself and my sister to that site to give honor to my grandparents. And now I return as an adult to give honor to her as well as my grandparents. And as I did the prayers you do when you're at a gravesite for any of your relatives, and I stopped, I looked around the cemetery, and I looked at all of the different gravestones that you could see as far as the eye could see. And I realized that in looking at each of those stones, I was looking at the remembrance of somebody who was once alive, and I was looking at them the way God sees them, not the way I or we as human beings see them. I could not tell by looking at a gravestone who in their life was tall or who was short, who was fat or who was skinny, who was a woman or who was a man, who was black or who was white, who was of what religious denomination. You couldn't see anything about the differences that we as people on this earth think of as important. When I think of what happened on that day 16 years ago, which is a real remembrance for all of us here who are adults. We were at meetings, some of us were at the Larchmont Mamaroneck Summit that morning at the Mamaroneck Diner, and that's where we experienced this horror. We realized that when the towers fell, Towers 1 and Towers 2 fell, when the wall of the Pentagon was breached, when the plane went down in Pennsylvania, the people that died without any concern for their demographic. Nobody said, you are dying today because you are white or because you are black or because you are liberal or because you are conservative. The one thing that those 3,000 people had in common is they faced death that day because they were Americans. Because this was an attempt to make us fear and lose our sense of freedom and democracy and our sense of interaction with people, that we would worry about everything we might do in this open society, because terrorism has struck. And it has struck again and again. It struck in Paris. It struck in Orlando. It struck in Barcelona, in the 1,000 places, in London on the Westminster Bridge. And every single time they do that, they're trying to make us trade in our common humanity. Because there is one place where we are all equal, and that is in the graveyard. There is no differentiation at that point. There is a common humanity. The fate that those salesmen and secretaries faced that day, high up in the tower, the fate that those first responders faced as they went up the tower, was not based on anything other than the fact that they were a part of something that was bigger than them, that became this horrible remembrance of history. There were so many hard lessons that 9/11 has taught us and will continue to teach us. Ultimately, there's no consolation. We will do this again next year and the year after that, because we must do that. We must remember these people. We must remember their sacrifice, and we must remember the horror of that day. But if there's something we can learn from this, perhaps we can stop looking at each other as Catholic Americans and Protestant Americans and Jewish Americans and gay and Americans and straight Americans and black. We're Americans. They tried to kill all of us regardless of that. And out of that, we find unity. And we find a sense of common purpose until we do reach that common humanity in the graveyard that awaits every one of us. Thank you.
Next, we have County Legislator Catherine Parker.
Good afternoon. You know, 16 years later, this day is still a struggle. You know, for many of us here, that day just had unimaginable tragedy. The personal loss faced by some of us, the family members, the friends, the colleagues, the community members that were lost, was overwhelming. And in 2001, initially, it took days for us to really understand the breadth of the circle of loss. We learned about the names of the people that were connected to us from our memory, the college classmates that we hadn't thought about in many years, the parents of schoolmates. We recognized that we lost people who, again, we passed all the time and didn't realize that we were going to feel their loss ripped from our community. In Westchester, we lost 123 residents. What also began on 9/11 and grew by the hour and by the day was the realization that as Americans, we really didn't understand the depth of the hatred of our culture. That hatred was what put into place the machinations in action that dark day to shake us as Americans to the core and instill that fear in us. Let us all know that we were hated. But we are better than that. We came together and we faced that hatred. And as Americans, we were united against a common enemy, and we were united in seeing us heal as a people. I think it's very interesting that Rabbi Serkin's comments today, Senator Latimer's comments today, also think of the hate. And I think that we have it at the forefront today because in America, we are facing hatred again. And sometimes it seems like it's coming from our own countrymen. I do think that it's important on this day to honor those that lost their lives, that we put aside all our differences, partisan politics, as Senator Latimer reflected on our different demographic groups that we belong to, and we embrace each other again as Americans. If it were to happen today, I know that we would come together again stronger than ever. And that is very comforting, and that's what we should be thinking of on this day, to honor those that lost their lives 16 years ago. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back to our order in our program, and I'd like to invite the Mayor of Larchmont, Lorraine Walsh, to speak.
Thank you. Over the past week, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I would like to say today. What lofty thoughts or deeper meaning could I draw from remembrances of 9/11? But then a few days ago, I also had the opportunity to spend a little time with a woman who lost her husband in the Twin Towers. And while we were speaking about a completely different topic, several times she drew a connection between what we were discussing and the events of 9/11. And it really struck me how strongly, not just the fact of her loss, but the manner of her loss continues to color so much of her life and that of her family. For me, 9/11 was a scary and painfully sad day, which I will never forget. But for her, it was a life changer. So sometimes we don't need to find a deeper meaning. Sometimes something simple and obvious will do. So today, I will honor her loss, remember those who were taken away from us, and thank those who continue to protect us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite up Deputy Mayor Lou Santoro from the Village of Mamaroneck.
I know all of us are here today, in fact, for all Americans, September 11, 2001, forever changed our world. Just as December 7, 2014, Pearl Harbor Day, defined a generation, September 11th has shaped who we are, why we live our daily lives, and what we believe in. The attacks in the morning on September 11th provided us with an ugly, painful reminder of the hatred and evil, the rage and resentment which resides in the hearts of some. The United States of America remains one of the most desirable places on this planet to live, not for our oceans and our plains, not for our mountains and rivers, not for our cars, our homes, or our technology, but for our freedom. Our American spirit is defined by our ability to reach out to help others, even if the unthinkable crisis and the unfathomable odds. Just think about the courage of our police, fire, and EMS who rushed into the 2 burning towers to bring thousands to safety, or the courage of Flight 93 passengers who resolved to save the lives of perhaps hundreds of others innocent victims on the ground by storming the cabin of their plane. I say to those who masterminded this crew pilot and to those who carried it out, the spirit of our nation will not be defeated by your twisted and deplorable schemes. Our American spirit is defined by our ability to rebuild, stronger, more united in purpose in our history as a nation on earth, and that's a testimony to us. Thank God, and God bless America.
Okay, now we're going to ask Zach Briault from the Boy Scouts and Abby Briault from the Girl Scouts to read the names of those we lost on September 11th, 2001.
Helen Beliofsky,
J. Howard Bolton Jr.,
Douglas G. Karpilov,
Maurice P. Kelly,
Helen Crossan Kittle,
Patricia Helen Kittle,
Franz J. Kestner,
Edward H. Luckett,
John T. McLaurin Jr.,
Christopher T. Orgilevitz,
John A. Rayo,
John F. Swain.
Let's have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We will now have the placing of the wreaths, and I invite the first responders to come forward and place their wreaths. I'd like to ask the veterans to place their wreath, please. And the Girl Scouts to place their wreath, please. Thank you. Now we would like to sing God Bless America, and we're going to be led by the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. So will you guys come forward, and I'm going to give you the mic.
Bless America, land that I love, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, wonderful. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, for helping us out today. Now I'd like to invite up Dr. William Crawford, to give us a benediction.
Let us, as we are here and present, stand, as we stand together. Because here, 16 years later, we remember. With Girl Scouts and so many children among us right now who were not yet even born then. And so we remember and help to remember that day, the loss, when, tall and shining and strong on that bluest of blue sky days, that brilliant morning just before the fireball and the dust cloud and the raining debris, the towers tumbled. God was in firefall, free fall, buckling and bearing our humanity, CEOs and cleaning women, firefighters and police, brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, 3,000 people in death, or one death, 3,000 times. We remember firefighters running up and into the tower's inferno, Bruce Springsteen's ode to them. Can't see nothing in front of me, can't see nothing coming up behind, make my way through the darkness, can't feel nothing but this chain that binds me. I don't know how far I've come, or how high I've climbed on my back, 60 pounds of stone, On my shoulder, half a mile of line. You know it. Come on up to the rising. Come on up, put your hand in mine. Come on up to the rising. Come on up for the rising tonight and now. That courage of those first responders, those firefighters, of police, and selfless in their care emergency workers, diligent and devoted, we remember them and those whom we have lost. We know there is no prayer to change the past, so we pray to live with memory, with constant love, and promise to combat evil and cherish goodness and peace. Rising up, may we be healed and united and empowered to stand firm and strong as people, a community, a country with compassion, liberty, and justice for all. Amen.
I would like to thank all of you for coming today and participating. You have enriched my world with your great words and company today. You have brought us together again. You have created community again. And you remind us of the beauty of our community. And yes, there was hate and trauma and tragedy 16 years ago. And there still is in this world. But we as a community do shine sometimes, and this is one of those times. So thank you to all my colleagues, my invited guests, my municipal sisters, our first responders, our veterans, our kids. Thank you, thank you. And I have to make a special thank you to the Town of Mamaroneck Highway Department, because this beautiful spot is so beautiful because of them, and they worked really hard to make it happen. And I also want to give a special thank you to Sue Odierna, who really helped organize and put this whole program together. So thank you all. And now we can shake hands.
Good job, gentlemen.
He knows that he's in one of the best communities here.
I am, and that's why I'm going to keep it very short. It's just such an honor to represent Larchmont, Mamaroneck. It's just such an honor to do it, and this is the reason it's such an honor for me. The people here who care about community, who care about the country, who care about social justice. This is where it's all at. So I want to thank you for being my constituents. And this is a tragedy, obviously. We all remember where we were 16 years ago. Those of you who are as old as me, you know, there were certain events that you don't forget. We remember where we were when President Kennedy was assassinated. We remember where we were when our children were born. And we remember where we were on that horrible morning of 9/11, 16 years ago. And I think what it's done is it's brought us closer as Americans. I know there's differences of opinion on the things, but we really, I think for the first time, understand the threat to all of us, and why it's so important to be strong and to help each other. And finally, let me say this: the wonderful first responders, You know, it's just wonderful to see people in all corners of the country willing to put their lives in jeopardy so that other people could be safe. And so I want to personally thank all our first responders who do such a wonderful job. Makes me proud to be an American, and thank you so much. And thank you for listening. Take care.